Hello, and welcome to a discussion about the future of cryptocurrencies. Since early 2009, when we first began to hear about the emergence of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies have taken off. And they've evolved to include the creation of stablecoins, which are linked to government-backed currencies, to include the creation of non-fungible tokens and other innovations. Cryptocurrencies have also seen wild valuation changes. And just in January, we saw a dramatic drop in their value. And this raises a lot of different questions for consumers and investors. Are they real? How will their use evolve? Are they going to become useful as a currency? Are they just speculative vehicles? How likely will they be to continue changing technologically? And will the potential spread of government-issued digital currency significantly affect the private cryptocurrency industry? I'm Sarah Sewall, Executive Vice President for Policy at IQT, and joining me today to explore these questions are my colleagues, Ming and Bob Gleichauf. Welcome, Ming and Bob. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Ming. I've been here at In-Q-Tel for about 9 years now, and I'm on our technology staff, where I focus a lot on emerging technology areas and try to find out how these interesting new areas can be applied to the national security mission through investments in small startup companies to move the needle ahead for our government partners.
I'm Bob. I've been with In-Q-Tel about 12 years after working in industry, in the tech industry and in startups. What I'm really looking forward here is sharing In-Q-Tel's unique perspective at the intersection of industry and government and academia with a venture capitalist point of view. And I think it'll be a fun discussion.
Super. Well, thanks so much again. And let's start with sort of a high-level discussion framing question for you guys to help our listeners and watchers as they go through the balance of the discussion with us. Why don't you give us your take on what the most important factors that'll be shaping the evolution of cryptocurrency are? Ming, do you want to start?
Certainly. I think what will be really interesting for the future of cryptocurrencies is how does CBDCs, Central Bank Digital Currencies, affect that future? Because this is a technology that's definitely been inspired by cryptocurrencies, and it has a huge effect on how cryptocurrencies, as they first evolved, go forward into the future and perhaps change and adapt. That's the first thing that I think is important. And the second thing is, how does the concept of digital assets evolve going forward within the world economy? Because that is definitely something that has culturally been normalized and introduced to the world by cryptocurrencies. And it'd be very interesting to see how that rolls out into the future.
Got it. So maybe we should start by giving our listeners a sense of how cryptocurrencies evolved over time. Can you just start with a little bit of history?
Certainly. So cryptocurrencies hit prime time in the public eye in 2009 with the release of Bitcoin, where it really started getting traction and getting attention. That was definitely not where the concept of cryptocurrency started. That started years ago. But the important part was it never actually reached meaningful adoption until Bitcoin actually happened. And the important evolution here is it started off primarily focused as a payments technology. And since then, it's really evolved beyond that to a general renaissance of the concept of digital assets and bringing those to the forefront and into the limelight. So it's been a very interesting trip along the way, and who knows what happens going forward into the future.
But just to clarify, can you just talk about whether Bitcoin is the same as private cryptocurrency? What's that universe like?
Great question. So that universe started with Bitcoin, but has since then expanded to thousands of private cryptocurrencies, other currencies that are similar to Bitcoin or have really evolved to be much more than just a simple payment system, even though Bitcoin is definitely not just a payment system these days. So understanding that there are so many different different inflections since, it's really interesting to see how things have actually evolved, and it continues to evolve going forward.
I think that's a key point. What we're looking at today is not really what we're going to be looking at in 3 years. There's so many things in motion right now to reshape this very frothy environment that we almost have to separate it out in terms of what are the different important functional types of crypto that are here and on the brink, and also who are the stakeholders and what does it mean to each of them. While crypto early on was interesting for payments and micropayments, especially internationally for disenfranchised end users, now it is the plaything of whales as well as a holder of value. It behaves like an equity in some cases. It behaves as something entirely different in others. It's right now going through a market adjustment, but unlike any previous time, huge amounts of money are coming from major players that have not accompanied the past ups and downs of it. It's just amazing all the things that are swirling around it right now.
The perfect case in point is the journey of crypto mining.
Mining is the proof of work process that is involved in computing or solving a cryptographic puzzle. And once you solve it, and if you beat out others in solving it faster than they are, you get to contribute to a block in the chain, and you are paid then a small token, a small dividend.
In Bitcoin, in the beginning, when everyone was using just their computers to mine for cryptocurrencies, it was very fair. It was very equitable. If you brought a certain amount of compute to the game, you would get a certain amount of the overall Bitcoin, newly generated Bitcoin pie. However, as inequities got introduced at the technological level to the ecosystem, and mining happened to move towards GPU hardware, to FPGA hardware, to now specialized chips that have to be built specifically for mining and cost thousands of dollars to actually purchase, it has actually become less equitable, even though the spirit was a spirit of equity. Because now, in order to get those types of mining rigs that use these specialized ASICs, you're going to have to put out thousands of dollars ahead of time. And you, as a normal participant, may not be able to do that. So it has actually eroded over time the equities of the overall technology. And it's interesting to see where we are now, because that drives really the push towards trying new things like proof of stake, which we hope will actually be more equitable going forward into the future, perhaps in a different way. And it's very interesting to see how that's actually playing out.
So you guys are talking about the ways in which Bitcoin is created. Can you just back it up a little bit and explain the difference between proof of work and proof of stake and why it matters, why we should care?
Maybe a high-level way of trying to recast some of that is that proof of work involves demonstrating a huge amount of computational horsepower to prove something, where proof of stake relies on your past activity to prove that you're trustworthy. And by proving things based on past behavior, that's actually computationally much more efficient than having to prove at that moment in time through consensus, which is what proof of work. There are competing systems, proof of stake, that are 2 orders of magnitude more efficient and use much less energy. And then there are creative things being developed where specialized kind of work is done at a different layer than the block and tackle of managing a distributed crypto digital asset or digital commodity.
It's important to remember that in the scheme of things, it's still very new technology. Proof of work was what Bitcoin deployed with, but ultimately Bitcoin really is just an experiment, and it's an evolving experiment. And what we're seeing here is that evolution of, hey, let's start trying out proof of work and seeing how it works. We see some pros. It's very defensible in the sense that it's been running for the last 13 years. We see some cons. The amount of power consumption is astronomical. Is that scalable into the future? Probably not. So let's try different things. Let's try proof of stake. Let's try different flavors of proof of stake. different flavors of many different kinds of what they call consensus mechanisms, which really, at its core, is merely deciding what's going to go into the Bitcoin, into the blockchain ledger as a voting mechanism. So understanding where we're going with that, it's a continual evolution, and it's fascinating to watch.
There are lots of different crypto coins or token systems that are building on a proof of stake approach, and then there are variations on proof of stake. Every one of these approaches has trade-offs. If you do proof of stake, one of the things that it doesn't do well that proof of work does is a fairness algorithm, if you will. With proof of work, all players have equal opportunity, assuming whatever compute power they have access to contribute. In proof of stake, those that have already sizable positions have a greater impact on what the outcomes are in any consensus decision. And there are some that are concerned that this begins to centralize what is a distributed protocol. And that's one of the attractions of cryptocurrencies is instead of in God we trust, it's in we trust.
So one of the ways that it's changing is the risks for centralization, but the trade-offs seem to be to include environmental benefits in that. And so
they're essential because the cost of production is getting too high. And at some point right now with proof of work, you're going to spend more money computing than the value you get out of it. And that's untenable. And that's why we have to go to proof of stake. Then it gets to really, who are the winners and losers going to be? And the thing here is the best technology is not necessarily the one that will win or the best implementation. And if you look at the proof of stake contenders, you have Ethereum, which has market share and all the momentum, but then you have Polkadot, you have Solana, you have Cosmos, you have all these others that are using proof of stake that are sort of challenging Ethereum. But it's unclear who the winners will be, other than Ethereum just right now has the bulk of the momentum, albeit they have yet to come through on their projections that they're going to release a proof of stake implementation by middle of this calendar year. We'll see. They've been criticized for being not able to deliver on some of their projections.
And as you think about that universe of private cryptocurrencies, one of the big questions that consumers have is, what do we actually use them for? I mean, I'm limited in what I can buy. Can you talk a little bit about the ability to use them the way we think about using a dollar?
It's not being used as a payments platform right now. You don't go out and buy pizza with Bitcoin much anymore. You use it as an equity. You may use it to fund things that you want less visible. What else, Ming? How would you characterize how Bitcoin operates? It's a holder of value, if you want to treat it more like how the bankers might or economists might term it, in that you've put some of your assets into it and it holds that value and it fluctuates in a market. But it's generally right now almost somewhat of a closed system in that you use Bitcoin with other cryptos. You're not exchanging it with fiat currencies much. I don't see that. Do you, Ming?
I think the way that I think about it is that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general have evolved to be more of a speculative asset. And you hear about this all the time, right? It is being treated more like a speculative asset than a payments platform. So to your point, Bob, you don't generally see a lot of people. It does happen, right? People still use it as a payment platform, but that is not the common use case. And because of that, it really does evolve what the platform is good for. And I think it's a very healthy thing for the ecosystem to see what are the use cases that this can address and which ones are particularly strong and which ones aren't particularly strong.
I think another aspect of this that intrigues me with crypto is that if you look at the regular financial system, the players who influence the financial system are the incumbents in the financial system, whether it's the banks, the international payments industry, or the intermediate payments economy that is part of Visa, Square, PayPal, Venmo, all of that. In crypto, it is a groundswell, grassroots system mixed in with other elements. It's kind of one's top down more, the other is bottom up or organic. That's an interesting dynamic we have to wrap our heads around and fully understand. And you don't necessarily go to the same data sources to understand crypto that you do with traditional finance or international payments or even mobile payments. And we're starting to see the financial world wake up to the dynamics that are driving crypto because there's real money now in crypto. And there's some behaviors that aren't fully understood when you get into things like digital assets that are being funded with non-fungible tokens. There's some really crazy amounts of money being thrown around there that we need to understand better.
So one of the things that you guys have both talked about is the volatility and the limited payment ability for crypto at this current point in time. And part of the reason why stablecoins evolved was to try to link, the cryptocurrencies to government-held assets that had constant value to try to bridge that world. And now with, China developing its CBDC, its Central Bank Digital Currency, we've got a really interesting, major mover in the realm of government-issued digital currencies, which is making digital currency go really mainstream. So can you talk a little bit about both stablecoins and CBDCs and how they were reactions to the original version of cryptocurrencies and what the emergence of a government digital currency could mean for both the Bitcoins of the world and the Ethereums of the world, as well as the stable coins?
I just would like to insert that stablecoin are a sleight of hand financially to try to add in a sense of stability that is a chimera. It's not true. If you look under the covers and read about some of these stablecoins, they're trying to say dollar for unit of crypto, the dollar's behind you and it'll track that and stabilize it. But when you look, it's impossible for them to scale up and own enough dollars to follow through in what they're talking about. And it also has potentially destabilizing impact on those currencies, fiat currencies that they're relying on, typically the US dollar. And it is getting more regulatory scrutiny than any other aspect right now of crypto because it's a sleight of hand and it's problematic. And so I don't think long term they're going to survive.
So Ming, where do you agree with Bob? Where do you disagree? And how do you think about the future of all these different vehicles?
The way I see stablecoins is that they are a very interesting case in point of the evolution of cryptocurrencies as they try to live with the real world. One of the biggest perceived problems with cryptocurrencies is the wild swings in value. They are nice for a speculative asset because if you want to make some money, that's something that might even be desirable. However, as a payment system, stablecoins are a reaction to that single biggest weakness. It's an attempt by the ecosystem to stabilize, it's all in the name, stabilize the value of the cryptocurrency so we can still reap the benefits of a purely electronic, decentralized cryptocurrency, which allows us to make payments, yet not have to worry about, can I still buy something, the same amount, come next week when I want to use this cryptocurrency? And I think that's a really interesting evolution in the ecosystem. And I think it's also indicative of the overall ecosystem as CBDCs come out to say, look, we have to reevaluate the core question here. How good are cryptocurrencies as a payment mechanism? If they have serious drawbacks as compared to CBDCs, you'll probably see some reactions based off of that. And ultimately, it really is a healthy evolution to the system to weed out some of what makes sense and what doesn't make sense.
So what's good then, Ming, about a CBDC? What are the advantages that you're referencing here and how they might be compared to the limitations or advantages of crypto?
Let's start with the definition of a CBDC. We can very fundamentally think of CBDCs as merely a digital version of central bank backed currency. So it's the digital version of a $20 bill. And the biggest pro behind such a currency is that you have the power of a central bank behind it. You don't have to worry about the fact that this might be a currency that represents a third party trying to put together a payment vehicle that doesn't actually have that federal backing behind it. Having that backing of a central bank is really important because it creates that stability that we crave in a payment system. So because of that, it's very important for CBDCs to be able to fill that niche of this is probably the most stable means of payment as we've culturally accepted.
It also takes advantage of pre-existing wiring in the current global financial system. Once you go through that digital CBDC, you're taking advantage of all the features inherently built in behind it, not having to reinvent. What interests me here also is that I think CBDCs are inevitable. They're coming. And as they come, crypto is morphing in front of us. The clearest sign of that is non-fungible tokens and smart contracts. My belief is that Bitcoin either changes or literally withers as CBDCs come along and morph into more robust and shape-shifting smart contracts like we have with Ethereum that is driving things like NFTs. And that these more application-specific uses of crypto are what will drive real innovation.
Can you
we'll see it in fashion,
unpack for us just a little bit, Bob, the difference between smart contracts and how that's both underneath the idea of payments, but also underneath some of these new innovations that you're talking about?
Sure. Bitcoin is, in effect, a streamlined smart contract set up to handle very simple payment and transfer of value back and forth. And it doesn't allow for any elaboration on that. Whereas a smart contract allows you to build in a variety of different mechanisms to account for various market demands or application vertical specific interests, like we see with things in the NFT market, where each NFT defines slightly different rules of what it means to purchase and then be a member of and to then share what you buy into in terms of that digital asset. The most probably well-known are CryptoPunks, followed by the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Those are clubs where you buy an asset, but you buy into something that is social as well, that is not as strongly expressed in Bitcoin, although there is very much a sense of belonging when you own Bitcoin too. But it's even stronger in these smart contracts around NFTs. That's also driving the headlines in that when someone spends $63 million on a pixelated image that is art or maybe fashion, it gets attention and drives copycats, it drives all sorts of interesting behaviors you don't see in a pure cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. It's a whole different, richer set of dynamics. And as CBDCs come in and reapply proven financial instruments and mechanisms with greater efficiencies, fewer middlemen in CBDCs, I think all the creativity will shift into smart contracts that are powered by things like Ethereum.
You're arguing, Bob, that basically having a government digital currency will put pressure on any payments uses of crypto or stable coins, and that instead the underlying private crypto markets are likely to evolve to become sort of assets, commodities that are used in different ways than we think about money itself. Is that fundamentally what you're saying?
Assets, commodities, and social engagements.
So Ming, is that going to happen? What could keep that from happening? What are the factors that will accelerate or shape that reaction to CBDCs and the different functions that crypto serves?
Ultimately, the way I like to think about the cryptocurrency ecosystem, without even talking about CBDCs, cryptocurrency ecosystem, and certainly anything that's evolved beyond that, is it is a social contract amongst people in the world, just like money in general, currencies. The single most important thing that cryptocurrencies has done for us is to create that cultural awareness and acceptance of the utility and the normalcy of using digital assets. Which is to say that as NFTs evolve, as the different uses of cryptocurrencies evolve, what actually drives their success and adoption are the social undercurrents of what takes hold, what brings utility, what is meaningful to people out there who ultimately have to accept this new technology. And because of that, there's often a gigantic question mark around, hey, will this be successful in the long run? Right now, NFTs are very hot and very interesting to people. Do I think it will endure into the future? Probably. What does that actually look like in 5 years is really hard to predict. And I think that's a really important thing to be respectful of.
I can give an anecdote through one of my kids, who all of his college roommates, they've all started buying NFTs of varying types. And then they were all kidding each other about what a stupid acquisition, or, oh, you got one of those, maybe I'll get one of those. And then they're talking to other friends, you want to go in halvesies with me, or why don't the three of us do this? These are smart, highly educated people trading Pokemon cards effectively, but with real money. I mean, sometimes it's just like a Pokemon card in that you buy a packet with no idea of what you're getting inside it until you rip it open. That's going to shape long-term what these things become. But the fact that grown adults are putting real money into something like this, that means we got to pay attention.
I think the social contract that drives the adoption and acceptance of cryptocurrencies and all its derivative technologies really is that killer app that everyone talks about for the ecosystem. It's all playing out in front of us in this social experiment.
You already see vendors like Adidas, Nike, sports teams that are getting involved because not of the financial side of it so much as the advertising, if you will, or the brand management that it provides, and that it's targeting a certain demographic. That's very powerful. Ad tech is always a powerful motivator and market. And this is where NFTs right now are really going. And I'm very interested in the feedback loop that is occurring there. Not to ignore what's going on in classic crypto, but I really look at crypto right now in terms of the shadow of CBDCs that are coming along soon and the impact that CBDCs will have.
How does the NFT evolution and the future of crypto relate to the metaverse, if at all?
The metaverse is a combination of an asset and a social group, right? And I actually think buying a virtual piece of real estate is economically more logical than buying a pixelated image. Because once you own a digital place that people have to go through, or that other people would like to advertise on or have access to your place where others are going, that's a value and you can monetize. And so the metaverse is an experience, not just an asset. And I think we have to start thinking about crypto in terms of as a asset and a persistent experience, as much as a holder of value or a payment. That's why everything has a potential to really morph. And I'm looking for what will be the iPod of crypto or of smart contracts.
Who is it who decides how this industry evolves? Who sets the standards for it, guides its ethics? How does that happen in this decentralized virtual industry?
That's what's so beautiful about it. It's very much a grassroots type community where the community itself works together and decides where do we want to go with this, and ultimately decides what is going to happen over time. And they do so over forums, they do so over social media, they do so over in-person meetings at conferences. It's very organic and it self-organizes to some degree what's going to happen going forward into the future based on any number of reasons why, hey, this would be really interesting, this would be really useful. And it's very interesting to see that roll out, because it's very much an egalitarian type ecosystem where what makes sense potentially has the power to move forward. And it's the people who are most passionate about it that actually go ahead, write the software, test the software, roll out the software, and make it actually happen.
I think it's also intriguing that it has aspects of it that are transparent in ways the financial system isn't. If I want to see, let's say, a new launch of a digital asset, an NFT, I can go to OpenSea and see who's buying what. I can see where bots may be operating on behalf of someone to buy up things. I can see who the whales are and how I measure
What do you
up.
mean by whales,
and that
Bob?
can inform. A whale is someone who owns a disproportionate or significant statistical amount of an asset or a coin. And in many of these, it is a very steep distribution of just a few people who own a lot of it, and then a long tail of very small
So is it
players.
really decentralized? In what way is it decentralized?
No, this is a lot of these coins are not decentralized. But there is the ability to find this information and understand the distribution if you're a smart participant. A lot of people just go to CoinDesk or whatever and buy a little bit of crypto and sort of watch it on the margins. But if you really want to know what's going on, the data is out there to see who the big players are and what's going on minute by minute if you want to. And the other thing from the social aspect is that online forums are very active with people, both knowledgeable and just, tourists, crypto tourists, going through and commenting on what's going on, what's hot, what they're thinking of. And there's a lot there to look at that you don't get through traditional financial systems that we need to understand better. Many computer scientists have a jaundiced view of crypto from the point of view of what you're getting out of it. But they are paying attention to how the application of crypto is driving the refinement and the robustness of underlying technologies that predate crypto around consensus protocols, distributed trust, journaled what are distributed immutable ledgers. And whatever happens with Bitcoin, with crypto, over time, those underlying mechanisms will pay dividends in other areas like supply chains or vaccine distribution and integrity. These underlying mechanisms have value in those other applications, and they're much more performant now than they were in 2009 because of the market demands that have shaped them.
So is that the source of In-Q-Tel's interest in this space? What does In-Q-Tel sort of look for and watch?
One of the cool things about In-Q-Tel is we look at both the explicit application or purpose, and then all the adjacencies or other unintended benefits and risks associated with that technology. And crypto is both, it's dual use. It both has goodness to it and it has threats to it. It has catalyzed a whole new industry on the with consequences to our national sovereignty and impact if we're not careful, because China's recent doubling down on CBDC ahead of the US is something that should give our policymakers and our government pause.
I think it'll be really interesting going forward into the future to seeing how the commercial market reacts to CBDCs. I'll give you an example. Even though government currencies provide a lot of utility when it comes to having a currency to actually spend, there are a lot of support pieces to the ecosystem that do have to develop, and it generally comes from private industry. Think about physical money, wallets, physical wallets. That's an entire industry that built up around hard currency, which is a necessary support ecosystem that needs to actually exist in order for people to practically use physical currencies. I imagine the same type of thing going on for CBDCs. It's one thing to provide the raw digital currency that goes under the hood. It's another thing to make the delivery of said currency convenient, easy to use, and something that you want to use as a citizen. And I see that being where private industry can really evolve itself to something that brings value and makes people want to actually use it. I think an important thing that gets called to account by CBDCs is both the traditional ecosystem, think credit cards, and the new ecosystem of cryptocurrencies as a payment mechanism to really call forth to the front, what is an objective thing that you're bringing and what costs are you bringing to the table in order to help with payments. With credit cards, when it comes to vendors, it's a very expensive mechanism now in order to accept credit cards. There's convenience to it. However, there's definitely an actual literal cost, 3 to 5% for credit cards. When it comes to CBDCs, there's logistics of how do you actually use as a consumer? How do you actually leverage it as a vendor, as a merchant? And seeing how that actually plays out allows us to call all of these new and old technologies, platforms to the forefront and say, hey, are you bringing utility? And let the people, let the merchants, let the commercial banking ecosystem pick what it is that they find most compelling.
And I would just add from a consumer point of view, the gas stations I pick are dependent on which ones support near field communication. I go to a gas station, I put my hand up, I buy my gas, and I go off. If I can't do that, I don't go to the gas station anymore. The power of the consumer in shaping all of this is all about the ease of use of the apps that are sitting on top of whatever is powering it underneath, whether it's crypto, CBDC, credit card, and ultimately, I don't care.
You are one informed consumer, Bob Gleichauf. That's awesome. I want to thank you guys both so much for your time today. We've exhausted our time, but I want to thank folks for joining us. And please look, we've got a new In-Q-Tel paper out on the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs website. We'll be posting that along with other content from our digital currency experts at In-Q-Tel on our website at In-Q-Tel, IQT.org. So thanks for joining us now, and please stay engaged in this broad and dynamic area of digital currencies.
This podcast was produced by Heartcast Media.